Welcome to Ask GMBN Tech. I'm looking forward to this because I've got a proper technician next to me, and we're going to get through your questions. Right, Owen, are you ready?
I'm ready.
He's ready and prepared. Let's get going with the first question. It's from George Walden, and he says, okay, so I've got a 2016 white T130S.
Nice
Okay,
bike,
there's the
yeah.
bike. It's got a GXP bottom bracket. Can I swap the bottom bracket and cranks to dub, or is the bottom bracket frame dependent?
Right. It's really easy to get into a pickle on
Yes.
bottom brackets because there are lots and lots of standards, and already we've covered BB and bottom bracket. That's the same term. Next, we're talking about GXP BB. So a GXP is a SRAM brand, and when we say brand, it's also the diameter of the axle, and that's the key bit. Because if it's fitting into this kind of a threaded shell, done my research, the white came with a threaded shell, a BSA, which is Birmingham Small Arms. The GXP was one style of axle, and where it stepped, so you'd have like a different size cup on each side, so it all slots together. So back to the question, we've got, can I fit a dub one? What's dub?
What's dub?
Okay, it's not the music style, it's a newer, big diameter axle that SRAM came out with, and it's the same diameter all the way through, so both cups are the same, which is kind of nice. And effectively, you'll need a BSA, so the threaded style, dub bottom bracket, and you can get it. It does exist. The only thing that you'll have to measure is your bottom bracket shell, so that's the width of it. I think it's a 73, because you have a 68 or a 73, which you either need, there's an internal plastic cup, or sometimes it's metal, so you thread both bits in, and then there's this internal cup to help protect the inside of the bearings. Now, if you're being a really good citizen and a good mechanic, you should replace this and get the right size one. But you will also have to play with some of the spacers, and the SRAM instruction is really good now, detailed, so when you thread it on, you'll have to move the spacer around to get it correct. So it is standard, you can do it, you don't have to have anything wild, but you need a dub BSA bottom bracket. It's confusing, but hopefully does that cover all?
It does, and I'm glad it ended with George, you can do it.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Right, next question. This one is from CXC XCCCC.
Great.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right, here's the question. Does rim width matter? Short, concise. Go for it, Owen.
Right. So, I mean, what's great is we've got a really concise question that will now grow exponentially.
Yes.
So, rim width does impact the carcass size, essentially. And lots of tyre brands and lots of rim manufacturers, and thus wheel manufacturers, work with the eThirteen, which is a European standards body that creates standards for tyres.
Can I just say, that sounds like the most boring organisation in the world, but continue.
I mean, they probably feel a bit tired a lot of the time. But anyway, they make standards of, if you've got a 2.4 tyre, it needs to be measured as 2.4 on a certain measurement of rim. Because there was a while in mountain biking and other sports where you'd have a tyre, and the decal or the hot patch on it will say it's this size, and you put it on a rim and it's completely different.
Yes.
So for a long time, that standard was very narrow because we had really narrow, and not just the downhill dudes, trials dudes and dudettes.
Yeah, well, I mean, we
wide
used,
rims.
on our rear wheel particularly, we used to run as wide a rim as we could find, and eventually Trials brand started making trial-specific rims.
Okay, yeah.
And they did start making trial-specific tyres too, but when we didn't have a trial-specific rim or tyre, we used to just find the widest rim we could, and then we would get a tyre, usually would be quite a low-profile tyre, and just create as square a profile as you could get on the tyre, so it was just like a little box, and try and replicate a motorcycle rear tyre, basically.
Because when you're hopping on the bike, it's really specific in terms of how you're using that rear wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just want a really nice, strong platform to be hopping on, because usually, literally, that contact patch is it. It's the only thing. It's the only bit of grip you've got.
Yep.
So yeah, I've got a bit of experience with rim width.
Perfect. There you go. And that's what's interesting. So rim width definitely changes carcass. And when early on we didn't have that many tyre options, it wasn't that much of a problem. But now, well, I guess the thing was we settled on tyre sizes, and then fat bikes came out, and we all went wild, and we had really big tyres, we had matching big rims. Then we had plus size tyres,
Where did it
more
go?
history. I know. Well, this is what's really fun. We had plus size tyres, which were a lot. So it does mean that you have to be a lot more sensitive and mindful about matching the tyre size and the rim profile to make sure that's correct, because some rims will have maximum size and minimum sizes that you can fit on, because you are fitting a kind of like squaring the tyre carcass out. But if you do that to some tyres and you're trying to go around corners, well, you get that kind of really hard edge, so you just don't get traction. Different tyres have got different carcass shapes as well. So cross-country tyres might have a more rounded profile, sort of a gravity tyres might have a squarer profile, so you've got an edge to dig into. So you've got to match them like for like. Also, pressure is a concern as well. So depending on what width rim you've got and what tyre size, you are going to have different pressures. So it's not a short answer, even the question was really short. There's a lot going on. There are some real benefits. Play around, but make sure you stick within the boundaries that the rim and tyre manufacturers set.
Well, I mean, it was a great question. It was a short question. Does rim width matter? And the answer, we could shorten down to yes.
Thank you.
It really does. Daryl Barnes is asking, the choice of casing is obviously really important when choosing new tyres. But how long do tyres last before the case degrade? Because it does. Over time, do softer compounds harden and lose their grippiness? And does riding in hot and cold climates make a difference? Or do they last as long as there's still knobs on the tyres?
Oof.
Oh, that's another deep one, isn't it?
Isn't it? It's great. I mean, the headline figure is yes, tyres degrade over time.
I know that because I've got really old ones on my retro bike at home, and they have degraded. They are. They just like have crumbled away.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Older Tamwall tyres were even worse, where the sidewalls were just...
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
So they've degraded for a number of different reasons. So, well, we say rubber, but it's not just rubber on a tyre. It's a mix of rubber and lots of other compounds. And some of those compounds effectively are like, I think the term is outgassing. So effectively they're still drying out. And that's why I think I'm going to say they've got a higher content of oil, which makes them softer. And as that kind of outgasses and dries, then the tyres do harden up, which can mean that the outer carcass, you can have some sort of like surface cracking, which, can affect the rubber. I mean, softer rubber compounds do wear quicker because by their very nature, they are softer. So that's another problem in terms of, braking edges are going to wear quicker. And because it's softer, it will wear out. But back to the question about carcass. I'll pause myself. Why do they degrade? So we've got this outgassing, but that can be accelerated if it's really hot, because that can increase it. Also, UV light. It's not just bad for our skin, it's also bad for tyres, because again, it can, just artificially age them really quickly. So if
sun cream?
I mean, that's an option. Maybe that's a product for the future.
Yeah, just advice.
I like it. So back to carcasses, not dead ones, but tyre carcasses, which hopefully aren't dead. But can they age? Yes, they can.
Yes.
They're not going to be affected by the UV light. They're not going to be affected by the sort of like the heat as much, because they're protected in their little rubber coat on the inside and the outside, but they are going to degrade. Do they lose their grippiness? Yes, they do. Can you damage them with excess pressures? Yes, you can. Tyres are finite.
Here's another question for you, Owen. Tim Sadler says, okay, I need to know more about eThirteen Sidekick Hub, which Louise Ferguson has on her Intense bike. I don't know about this product. If it has a floating mechanical mechanism, and does that essentially replace an O-chain? So is that what it's doing?
Okay, so I feel like we've got a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
Because...
Unlike you.
I know, yeah. Right, what are we talking about? We're talking about a special hub. This is for a downhill racer. And what the downhill racer are looking for is kind of efficiency in rolling, one thing. We're also looking at suspension efficiency. Efficiency, that's the right term. And some of the nuances of suspension. Suspension systems... Because the point between the bottom bracket and the rear wheel, often that grows. And that means you've also got chain growth. And tuning that chain growth can mean that you can have really good properties of anti-squat, which is whereby just the acceleration motion moves you backwards. So it's not just raw power, although Lou Ferguson is very fast, so that could be an issue. So what happens there is that the suspension system is sort of like locking the suspension up. It's not locking it, but it's loading it. And that means it's not going to be as compliant. And you're going to have the small bump compliance. So an Italian brand called O-Chain developed this really clever system where effectively the chainring on the bike is allowed to float a little bit. So under load, there's about up to 12 degrees of movement before effectively the chainring's engaged. So it's a bit like a sort of, I don't know, a floating clutch. It's hard to describe. When you see it, it does make more sense. And this movement on the chainring means that the feedback that you get from this chain growth as the bike moves through the bumps doesn't move the cranks, so you don't get pedal kickback. So the bike feels much, much smoother, and the suspension can actually work more effectively. So that's what's happening, chainring. That's a brief discussion of suspension. So back to the hub. eThirteen have developed a Sidekick hub, which is not Sidekick, I should say. And effectively, it's using pause, so the little kind of engagement tabs, which click and make the noise, and also transfer the load in your hub from the cassette through to the wheel. Those have a special sort of sliding mechanism whereby as the wheel rotates forward, it disengages these pawls and actually pulls them in. So it's only when you load it that they kind of flick back out.
Right.
Hopefully these concepts make sense in me describing them. So yes, it does a very similar thing to O-Chain in terms of it helps decouple what's happening to the drivetrain and the suspension. So it should keep it more active. Is it the same? No, because it is working differently. And the reason why I know this is not because I'm an alpha nerd and know everything. It's more that I randomly bumped into the dudes from O-Chain and chatted to them. Yeah. And they were really open and honest, really great guys. They'd actually done some consulting with eThirteen because they were kind of like, eThirteen were really nice and said, look, we're doing this. Are we kind of like impacting you? And they're like, oh, okay, actually, no, we've looked at how it could work in a hub versus how it works at the chain, and for us it's different. So yeah, back to Tim's question. Does it replace it? No. Could you run both? Yeah, both? You could do.
Well, surely you'd start to feel, and I suppose the hub part of it wouldn't create any move. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no.
I feel like I prefer the non-O-Chain version that's on Lou's bike. I think I like the sound of that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right, last question for you, Owen.
Okay.
And thankfully, it's only a little one. It's from Ale, and Ale says, I enjoy the efficiency of my short travel 130, 110 bike. However, I bottom out the suspension at least three times a ride, doing about 4-foot drops, fairly basic jumps in 15 miles of riding. Which is quite a lot, isn't it? Is this frequency of bottoming out harmful to the bike? Could be. Does it require additional maintenance? Might do. Is it harmful? Is it increasing the pressure, decreasing the sag? A good idea? Owen.
Well, you've answered quite a lot of this already.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that setup's not quite right.
Boom. Correct.
Yeah. So, what do you do?
What do? You watch a video that I've made on bottoming out. I know.
Promotion of himself.
Yeah. It's not just me, though. Thankfully, I chatted to other experts as well. And essentially, the kind of conclusion is that, yes, as a benchmark, bottoming out your bike on what you consider gnarly terrain is a really good saying. Just the once. But chatting to Jake, he's a World Cup mechanic, suspension tuner, and a bike developer. So that new Mondraker that's going really well this year, he helped make last year. So his guidance on bottom out is actually, you don't want to bottom out once a ride, maybe when you're hitting some really gnarly terrain. So if you're, let's say in the UK as an example, we're going to go to Bike Park Wales and we're going to do a black run. Right, okay. We only want to bottom out there. So effectively we're going to have quite a stiff setup. But that means when we do bottom out and we're in that kind of, oh crap moment, we've got a little bit in reserve.
Yes.
I think if you're kind of pushing riding, which sounds like you're doing 4-foot drops, basic jumps are not basic. Jumps are jumps. So I would say that, you need to up spring rate. So that's increasing air pressure or increasing the spring rate of the coil spring. You could play with volume space as well. Again, I talk about that in the video. But essentially, get that sort of ride height, get that sag number. I've got to always get this confused in terms of the sag number lower and the ride height higher. Yeah, I think that's the right way around.
Yeah, I'd love to say I could correct you if you were wrong, but I wouldn't actually know on sag height. I don't get to mess with that much on my bike. I would say that maybe a slightly bigger travel bike was in order myself, but...
I mean, yeah.
A little bit. But, hey, that's spendy. That's a spendy answer right there. I just bought you a new bike.
I mean, that could be the answer to a lot of these questions.
Yeah, it's a good one, though, and a good one to end on. Thank you for your questions. It's very simple to get involved in Ask GMBN Tech. You just put hashtag Ask GMBN Tech, and we will find your question. And you could be on the show next week, which would be good. Owen, wicked.
Thank you very much.
See you next time.